Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The Nexus did not have time to raise an alarm. The first breaching pod tore through the station's hull like a claw through flesh, spraying molten metal across the diplomatic corridor. Atmosphere screamed into vacuum. Lights died. And before the emergency bulkheads could seal, the pod split open. DRAKORATH soldiers poured out. 2.7 meters of scaled muscle and armored hide, crocodilian heads snapping left and right, golden eyes already tracking targets. Their weapons barked short, brutal bursts of plasma that turned Council security into ash and scattered bone. More pods hit, dozens, then hundreds. The Nexus shuddered under the assault. Lights flickered. The station's ancient superstructure groaned as explosive charges detonated along its spine, severing primary power conduits and communication arrays in precise sequence. In the Grand Chamber, 37 species sat frozen in their seats. Delegates, ambassadors, representatives of civilizations that had maintained peace for over 4,000 years. They had been debating trade tariffs when the first explosion rocked the station. Now they watched the main doors buckle inward. Ambassador Turan of the Thalkai rose from his seat, his feathered crest flattened against his skull, an instinctive response to danger his species had never fully shed. Around him, other delegates scrambled for exits that no longer existed. Some called for security that would never come. Others simply stood, unable to process what was happening. The doors exploded inward. DRAKORATH soldiers flooded the chamber, their heavy footfalls shaking the ancient floor. They spread out in tactical formation, weapons raised, and began firing. No demands, no warnings, no negotiation. Just slaughter. The Felnorian ambassador took 3 plasma bolts to the chest before he could rise from his chair. The Vreth delegation, all 4 of them, died in a tight cluster near the eastern exit, cut down as they tried to flee. The Omuran representative, a species known for their pacifism, simply closed his eyes and accepted his death in silence. Turan did not run. He had lived for over 200 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had brokered treaties between species that had warred for millennia. He knew with absolute certainty that this was the end of everything the Council represented. But he also knew something else. He pushed through the chaos, moving against the tide of fleeing delegates. Plasma fire scorched the air around him. A bolt grazed his shoulder, searing through feathers and flesh. He ignored the pain. There was something he had to do. He reached the edge of the chamber and pressed himself against the wall, momentarily shielded by an overturned table. His hands moved to his wrist, to the simple device strapped there. A gift, a token of friendship from a species the Council had deemed too primitive to join. General Floyd Carpenter of Earth had given it to him after their last meeting. A pleasant conversation, warm, hopeful. "If you ever need us," Carpenter had said, "this will reach us, anywhere in the galaxy. It is not much, but it is a promise." Turan had worn it every day since. His clawed fingers found the activation switch. The device was crude by galactic standards. No encryption, no quantum entanglement. Just a simple radio beacon broadcasting on an old Earth frequency. He pressed the switch. A small light blinked green. The signal began to pulse. Turan looked up. A DRAKORATH soldier stood over him, plasma rifle aimed at his chest. The creature's jaws parted, revealing rows of serrated teeth. Its golden eyes showed nothing. No hatred, no satisfaction, no mercy. Just purpose. "You are too late," Turan said quietly. "Someone will come." The soldier fired. Turan's body crumpled against the wall, smoke rising from the wound in his chest. His eyes dimmed. His feathered crest fell still. But on his wrist, the small green light continued to blink. The signal continued to pulse. The massacre lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, The grand chamber was silent. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. Delegates, security, staff. The air was thick with smoke and the copper tang of alien blood. 37 species. 4,000 years of cooperation. Ended in less time than it took to brew tea. The main doors opened again. DRAKORATH entered. He was enormous. 3.1 meters of scarred, scaled flesh. His hide bore the marks of 100 conquests, old wounds that had healed into ridges of proud scar tissue. His tail dragged behind him, heavy enough to shatter bone. His golden eyes surveyed the carnage with the dispassion of a predator examining a successful hunt. He walked to the center of the chamber. His soldiers parted before him, heads bowed. He stopped beside the body of the council's chief mediator, a small, fragile creature that had spent its life advocating for peace. DRAKORATH placed one massive foot on the corpse's chest. "This," he rumbled, his voice like gravel dragged over stone, "is what cooperation earns you." He looked up at the observation galleries, where recording devices still flickered with power. His jaws parted in what might have been a smile. "I am DRAKORATH. For 10,000 years, my people waited beyond your borders. We watched you grow soft. We watched you forget what strength means." He pressed down. Bones cracked beneath his foot. "The DRAKORATH Imperium does not negotiate. We do not join. We do not share." His tail swept across the floor, scattering bodies like discarded toys. "There is no more council. There is only rule. Comply, or be removed." He turned and walked toward the exit. His soldiers fell in behind him, their footsteps echoing through the silent chamber. Behind them, amid the carnage and the smoke and the cooling bodies, a small green light continued to blink on a dead ambassador's wrist. The signal pulsed on. 12 hours later, on the other side of the galaxy, a solar flare ended. Earth's communication arrays came back online one by one. Satellites rebooted. Ground stations reconnected. The blackout that had isolated the Sol system for half a day lifted like fog burning off under morning sun. In the mountains of New Mexico, the SETI array stirred to life. Dr. Emil Vasquez was the first to notice. He had been reviewing data logs when the anomaly appeared, a faint signal buried in the static, barely distinguishable from background noise. He ran it through the filters twice, then a third time. The signal persisted. "That is not possible," he muttered. He called his supervisor. His supervisor called the director. The director called someone in Washington, who called someone at the Pentagon, who called someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. The signal was not alien. It was human. An old Earth military frequency, emergency band, the kind of thing built into survival kits and diplomatic packages. Simple, analog, designed to be heard across any distance, through any interference. But the signal was not coming from Earth. It was coming from the Galactic Core. General Floyd Carpenter arrived at the facility 3 hours after the call. He was 61 years old, a career soldier who had served in conflicts most people had already forgotten. His face was lined with decades of hard decisions. His eyes were tired but sharp. He listened to the signal for a long time. The technicians watched him, waiting for orders, waiting for some explanation. Carpenter said nothing. He knew that frequency. He had authorized it himself, years ago, for a diplomatic package intended for a single recipient, a gift for a friend, a promise. Tren. The signal was not a call for help. There was no voice, no message, just a pulse, steady, unending. A beacon meant to be activated only if everything else had failed. Carpenter understood what that silence meant. Whatever had happened, Tren had not lived long enough to explain it. No follow-up transmission, no clarification, just the beacon, repeating into the void. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. And in his final moments, Tren had done the only thing left to him. He had reached out to Earth. Carpenter turned away from the console. His staff waited for him to speak. "Sir?" someone asked. "What do we do?" Find out what happened, Carpenter said. Every listening post, every relay we can access, any scrap of data the flare did not burn. I want answers. He walked toward the door, stopped, looked back. And get me a line to the Joint Chiefs. Secure channel. No leaks. The room erupted into motion. The answers came in pieces. Over the next 72 hours, Earth's intelligence network worked around the clock. Listening posts scattered across the outer colonies picked up fragments of transmissions. Deep space relays, some damaged by the flare, others simply too far to receive clear signals, slowly fed data back to Earth. The picture that emerged was worse than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Council had fallen, not collapsed, not destabilized, fallen, completely, violently, in a single coordinated strike. Intercepted communications painted a grim portrait. Distress calls from dozens of species, most cut short mid-transmission. Automated emergency broadcasts from stations that no longer responded. And beneath it all, a single message repeating on every frequency the galaxy had ever used. The DRAKORATH Imperium had announced itself. Carpenter stood in the Pentagon's secure briefing room, surrounded by admirals, generals, and intelligence directors. The screen before them displayed the translated message. The words hung in the air like poison. I am Vorak Dreth. The Council is no more. The DRAKORATH Imperium rules. All species will submit. All resistance will be extinguished. You have no allies. You have no hope. You have only one choice. Kneel or be erased. Silence filled the room. Admiral Hendricks, a Navy man with 40 years of service, was the first to speak. Who the hell are these things? Unknown, replied Director Simmons of Naval Intelligence. We have no records of the DRAKORATH in any Council database we have accessed. No contact, no sightings, no references. It is as if they did not exist until 3 days ago. They existed, Carpenter said quietly. They were just waiting. He stepped closer to the screen. The message played again. Vorak Dreth's rumbling voice filled the room. Run the visual, Carpenter ordered. The screen shifted. Grainy footage, recovered from a damaged relay near the galactic core, showed the aftermath of the attack. The Nexus station, its hull breached in dozens of places. Bodies floating in the vacuum. DRAKORATH warships, circling like predators around a carcass. And there, in the center of the frame, the Grand Chamber. Its great windows shattered, its floors stained with blood. Freeze there, Carpenter said. The image stopped. He walked closer, studying the carnage. His eyes found something near the edge of the frame, a body slumped against a wall. Feathered crest flattened against an avian skull. A small device on its wrist, still blinking. Terren. Carpenter stared at the image for a long moment. No one in the room spoke. He activated the beacon, Carpenter said finally. He turned to face the assembled commanders. Terren didn't have time to explain what was happening. He only knew something had gone terribly wrong. And when he needed someone he trusted, he reached out to the one place he could. He walked to the head of the table. His voice was steady, but something cold had settled behind his eyes. The DRAKORATH think the galaxy is theirs now. They think they have already won. They do not know about us. Earth was never inducted. We are not in their records. He placed both hands on the table. But in 6 months, maybe less, they will come here. They will expect another easy conquest. Another species to kneel. He met the eyes of the officers around the table. We won't give them that. Admiral Hendricks leaned forward. What are you proposing, General? Carpenter straightened. Full mobilization. Every shipyard, every weapons platform, every soldier we have. We activate the Aegis Ring. We bring Longbow Base to full operational status. We build a fleet, and we train it to kill these things. Are we ready for a war of that magnitude? Simmons asked. Carpenter didn't hesitate. We don't get to choose that, he said. They're coming eventually. The only question is whether we meet them prepared or on our knees. He turned back to the screen. The frozen image of Teren's body stared back at him. A friend, a diplomat, a believer in peace. Dead now, because peace had failed. He walked toward the door, stopped, looked back one final time. Get me everything we have on the DRAKORATH. Ship designs, weapon signatures, tactical patterns, anything our listening posts have captured. I want to know how they fight. And then? Hendricks asked. Carpenter's jaw tightened. And then we teach them how we fight. He left the room. Behind him, the message from DRAKORATH continued to play on loop. The Apex's voice echoed through the empty briefing room, promising extinction to all who resisted. Somewhere in the static, buried beneath the threats and the declarations of conquest, a small human signal still pulsed from the ruins of the Nexus. A beacon from a dead friend, a promise Earth intended to keep. 6 months later, the DRAKORATH came to Sol. Their fleet emerged from the void like a wound tearing open in space. Black ships, angular, jagged profiles that resembled predators frozen in metal. They numbered in the hundreds, dreadnoughts, carriers, assault cruisers, arranged in perfect formation as they crossed the outer boundary of the system. At the head of the armada, the largest vessel of all, the Throne of Scales. DRAKORATH's flagship, a mobile fortress bristling with plasma lances and gravity shears, its hull scarred from 100 conquests. The DRAKORATH had come to claim another world. On the bridge of the Throne of Scales, DRAKORATH stood before the observation viewport, his massive form silhouetted against the distant yellow sun. His golden eyes studied the system before him. 8 planets, a scattering of moons. One world teeming with life. Earth. His second in command, a scarred veteran named Korax, approached with a tactical display. Apex, we are detecting orbital structures around the 3rd planet. Primitive construction. No energy shields. No plasma signatures. DRAKORATH's jaws parted slightly. Amusement. Primitives, he rumbled. The Council's records mentioned this species. They were denied membership. Too young. Too weak. They were not on the subjugation list, Korax noted. Then they will learn submission firsthand. DRAKORATH turned from the viewport. Open a channel, all frequencies. Let them hear the voice of their new masters. The communication array activated. Vorak's message broadcast across the Sol system, drowning out every frequency, every signal, every transmission. Species of the 3rd planet. I am DRAKORATH, the Apex. The DRAKORATH Imperium has claimed this galaxy. Your council is ash. Your allies are corpses. You stand alone. He paused, letting the words sink in. You have one opportunity. Kneel before the Imperium. Surrender your world. Accept your place as servants. Resist, and you will cease to exist. You have 1 hour to respond. The message ended. Silence followed. The DRAKORATH fleet held position, waiting. DRAKORATH returned to his command throne, settling his massive form into the ancient seat. His tail coiled around the base. His claws tapped against the armrest with patient rhythm. 1 hour. More than enough time for primitives to realize their situation, to understand the futility of resistance, to beg for mercy. The minutes passed. Korax monitored the communication arrays. His frill twitched with growing unease. Apex. There is no response. They are afraid. Give them time. More minutes. The tactical display showed no movement from the human orbital structures. No transmissions. No distress signals. No pleas for negotiation. Nothing. Korax's unease deepened. Apex. Still no response. No communication of any kind. They are simply silent. DRAKORATH's eyes narrowed. This was not fear. Fear produced panic, chaos, desperate attempts at communication. "Scan their orbital platforms again," he ordered. Korax complied. The results appeared on the tactical display. His scales paled. Apex, the orbital structures. They are not stations. "Explain." "They are weapons. 12 platforms arranged in a ring around the planet. Electromagnetic accelerators. Kinetic projectile systems. They are." The first railgun slug hit the DRAKORATH Vanguard at 17 kilometers per second. It struck the lead destroyer without warning, a tungsten rod the size of a ground car, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by the Aegis ring's magnetic rails. The destroyer's shields flared, held for a fraction of a second, and then collapsed. The slug punched through the hull from bow to stern, exiting in a spray of molten metal and venting atmosphere. The ship died instantly. Then the rest of the ring opened fire. 12 platforms. 48 railgun batteries, all firing in synchronized sequence, pouring kinetic death into the DRAKORATH formation. Slugs tore through shields that had never faced this kind of sustained bombardment. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds found themselves shredded by simple metal, moving at impossible speed. Vorak Dreth surged to his feet. "Return fire!" The DRAKORATH fleet responded. Plasma lances lit the void, sending searing bolts of energy toward the orbital platforms. Gravity shears activated, warping space in lethal patterns. The counterattack was massive, overwhelming, exactly as it had been against every other species they had conquered. But the Aegis ring had been built by humans. And humans had learned, long ago, that shields could be drained, that energy weapons could be dodged, that the simplest weapons were often the most effective. The platforms were armored, not shielded, thick layers of tungsten and ceramic composite. No energy signature to target, no shields to collapse. The DRAKORATH plasma lances hit them and scorched their surfaces, but the platforms kept firing, and firing, and firing. On the bridge of the UEDC Carthage, General Floyd Carpenter watched the battle unfold. The flagship hung in formation with the rest of the human fleet, 47 vessels arranged in 3 battle groups behind the protection of the Aegis ring. The Carthage was a heavy carrier, bristling with fighter bays and torpedo tubes. Around it, destroyers and frigates held position, waiting for the order to advance. Carpenter stood at the central command console, his face illuminated by the tactical display. 6 months of preparation. 6 months of building, training, planning, all for this moment. Aegis ring reports nominal function, his tactical officer announced. Enemy Vanguard has lost 14 ships. They are attempting to reform. Longbow status? Primed and ready, awaiting your order. Carpenter nodded. The longbow stations on Luna were the second phase. Kinetic launch platforms designed to hurl massive tungsten rods across the void. Ship killers, each one capable of cracking a dreadnought in half. Hold longbow in reserve. Let them commit their fleet first. Aye, sir. On the display, the DRAKORATH formation was shifting. They had recovered from the initial shock and were pushing forward, their dreadnoughts forming a wall of shields and firepower. Plasma lances hammered at the Aegis ring. One platform took a direct hit from a gravity shear, its structure twisting and crumpling before it exploded. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship." On screen, Vorak Dreth's face appeared on the main display. His golden eyes burned with fury. His jaws were parted, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Humans." He spoke the word like a curse. "You dare to strike at the Imperium? You dare to resist?" Carpenter looked at the screen. His expression did not change. "You have made a mistake," Vorak Dreth continued. "A fatal one. I have conquered 100 species, burned 1,000 worlds. You are nothing. Insects. I will tear your fleet apart and feast on your ashes." The transmission waited for a response. Carpenter reached out and terminated the channel. "Helm," he said calmly. "Signal the fleet. all ahead full, hammer formation. The UEDC Carthage surged forward. Behind it, the entire human fleet followed. Destroyers, frigates, cruisers, all advancing in a wedge formation with the flagship at its center. The UEDC Ironfall took point, its assault batteries already charging. The two fleets closed the distance. And the real battle began. The void between Earth and the DRAKORATH Armada became a killing field. Railgun slugs and plasma lances crossed in the darkness. Ships on both sides died, some quickly, torn apart by kinetic impacts, others slowly, burning from internal fires as atmosphere vented into space. The Carthage shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed its port armor, scorching a black scar across the hull. Carpenter gripped the command console, but did not flinch. Damage report. Port armor section 7 compromised. No hull breach. Damage control teams responding. Keep firing. Target their carriers. The human fleet was smaller, outgunned in raw firepower, but they had advantages the DRAKORATH had not anticipated. Speed. Human ships were faster, more maneuverable. They dodged plasma lances that would have hit slower vessels. They slipped through gravity shear fields that should have torn them apart. Coordination. Every human ship operated as part of a single tactical network, sharing targeting data in real time. When one ship fired, 3 others adjusted their aim to compensate. The DRAKORATH fought as individuals. The humans fought as one. And most importantly, they had studied their enemy. 6 months of intercepted transmissions. 6 months of analyzing DRAKORATH tactics, weapons, shield frequencies. 6 months of learning exactly how to kill them. Enemy shields are weakening on the forward dreadnoughts, the tactical officer reported. Sustained fire is draining their power reserves faster than they can compensate. Concentrate fire on the lead ship, all batteries. The Ironfall acknowledged the order. Its main guns pivoted, locked onto the lead DRAKORATH dreadnought, and opened fire. 4 railgun slugs hit the ship in rapid succession. The first collapsed the shields. The second breached the hull. The third and fourth tore through the interior, shredding crew quarters and engineering sections. The dreadnought listed, trailing fire and debris. Then it exploded. A cheer went up across the human fleet, but Carpenter silenced it with a raised hand. "Stay focused. This is not over." He was right. On the throne of scales, Vorak Dreth watched the destruction of his dreadnought with cold fury. These primitives, these insects, they were actually fighting back, actually killing his ships. Unacceptable. "Launch the boarding swarms," he ordered. "All carriers, overwhelm them with numbers. Take their ships from within." Across the DRAKORATH fleet, carrier bays opened. Thousands of boarding pods launched into the void, each one carrying a squad of DRAKORATH soldiers. They streaked toward the human formation like a cloud of metal locusts, aiming for the gaps in the defensive fire. The Carthage's sensors screamed warnings. "Multiple inbound contacts! Boarding pods! Hundreds of them!" Carpenter's jaw tightened. This was the DRAKORATH's preferred tactic. Breach the hull, flood the corridors with soldiers, take the ship through brutal close-quarters combat. "All ships, defensive fire. Point defense batteries, full auto. Do not let them attach." Guns across the fleet swiveled, filling the void with streams of tracer fire. Boarding pods exploded by the dozens. But there were too many. Some slipped through. They hit the hulls of human ships with magnetic clamps, their cutting torches already burning through armor. On the destroyer UEDC, relentless, the first DRAKORATH soldiers breached the hull. They came through in a wave, 2.7 meters of scaled muscle and armored hide, plasma rifles barking, claws slashing. The human crew met them in the corridors with everything they had. Sergeant Major Darnell Vickers was the first to fire. His rifle bucked against his shoulder, putting 3 rounds into the chest of the lead DRAKORATH. The creature staggered but did not fall. Its scales absorbed the impacts like armor. It raised its plasma rifle and fired back. Vickers dove behind a bulkhead as the bolt scorched past him. "Armor-piercing rounds!" he shouted. "Aim for the joints! The throat!" His squad adjusted. The next volley targeted the gaps in the DRAKORATH's natural armor, the softer scales at the elbows, knees, and neck. Soldiers fell, but more kept coming. The corridor became a slaughterhouse. Across the fleet, similar battles raged. Humans and DRAKORATH fought hand-to-hand in the tight confines of ship corridors. The DRAKORATH were larger, stronger, harder to kill. But the humans were fighting for their home, their planet, their species. They did not retreat. On the Carthage, Carpenter received the reports with grim focus. Boarding parties on Relentless, Indomitable, and Fury's Edge. All ships reporting heavy resistance. Tell them to hold. Reinforcements are not available. Sir, Relentless is requesting. Tell them to hold. The words were hard, but Carpenter knew the truth. If he diverted ships to rescue boarded vessels, the formation would break. And if the formation broke, the DRAKORATH would win. Sir. The communications officer looked up. Message from Colonel Venn. Sigma Division reports ready. Carpenter paused. This was the moment. The plan they had trained for. The gamble that could end this battle or doom them all. Status of the Black Horizon. In position. Stealth systems active. Undetected by enemy sensors. Carpenter looked at the tactical display. The throne of scales sat at the center of the DRAKORATH formation, protected by a wall of escorts. Its shields were at full power. Its weapons were devastating anything that came close. But every ship had a weakness. Signal Colonel Venn. Operation Blackout is authorized. Disable that flagship. Aye, sir. On the UEDC Black Horizon, Colonel Derek Venn received the order. He stood in the stealth carrier's launch bay, surrounded by his team. 4 men. The best Sigma Division had. Each one had trained for this mission specifically. Each one knew they might not come back. Venn's scarred face showed no emotion as he addressed them. You heard the order. We breach the throne of scales. We find their shield generator. We disable it. Then we get out and let the fleet do the rest. Sergeant Dren Kowalski checked his shotgun. A custom weapon he called Whisper. And if we cannot get out? Then we make sure the shields go down anyway. Corporal Yusuf Smith finished syncing his tactical computer. I have their ship schematics. Shield generator should be in the lower engineering section. Heavy guard presence. Corporal Alexei Markov said nothing. He simply checked his rifle's scope, his face blank. Private First Class Tomas Reyes loaded the last of his breaching charges. How many DRAKORATH between us and the target? Unknown. Assume hundreds. Reyes nodded. Good. I brought extra charges. Venn almost smiled. Load up. Stealth pods launch in 60 seconds. The team moved to their pods. Small, single-occupant vessels designed for covert insertion. No weapons, no shields. Just speed and a sensor-absorbing hull. They would launch from Black Horizon, drift through the battle undetected, and attach to the throne of scales before the DRAKORATH even knew they were coming. That was the theory. Venn climbed into his pod. The hatch sealed. The launch countdown began. Around him, the battle raged. Human ships and DRAKORATH vessels tore each other apart in the void. The Aegis ring continued to fire, its platforms now reduced to 9. The Carthage traded broadsides with a DRAKORATH cruiser, both ships bleeding fire and debris. Everything hung in the balance. The countdown reached 0. The stealth pods launched. 5 metal coffins shot into the darkness, invisible to sensors, threading through the crossfire toward the enemy flagship. Venn watched through his pod's tiny viewport as plasma lances and railgun slugs crisscrossed the void around him. A DRAKORATH destroyer exploded less than a kilometer away. The shockwave rocked his pod, but did not breach it. He kept his breathing steady, focused on the mission. The throne of scales grew larger in his viewport, massive, terrifying. A predator frozen in metal, its hull scarred from 100 battles. His pod's computer chimed. 30 seconds to contact. Ven activated his tactical display. The other 4 pods were on course, no detection warnings. The DRAKORATH had no idea they were coming. 20 seconds. He checked his weapons: rifle, sidearm, combat knife, grenades. 10 seconds. The throne of scales filled his entire viewport now. Its hull was a wall of dark metal, pitted with weapon ports and sensor arrays. 5 seconds. He braced himself. Impact. The pod hit the hull with a magnetic clamp, attaching silently to the surface. Ven felt the jolt, but did not move. Outside, the cutting torch activated, burning through the enemy armor in a controlled ring. 30 seconds later, the breach was complete. Ven dropped through the hole and into the throne of scales. The interior was exactly as intelligence had predicted: hot, humid, dimly lit in shades of red and amber. The air smelled of ozone and something reptilian, a musk that clung to the walls and floor. His team dropped in behind him. Kowalski, Smith, Markov, Reyes, all accounted for. Ven signaled silently. "Move out." They advanced through the corridor, weapons raised. The ship thrummed around them. Engines, life support, the deep pulse of the shield generator drawing power from the main reactor. Somewhere above, Vorak Dreth commanded his fleet, unaware that humans were already inside his ship. That was about to change. Ven checked his tactical display. The shield generator was 4 decks down, through crew quarters, through security checkpoints, through whatever the DRAKORATH threw at them. He looked at his team. 4 men against a ship full of monsters. He moved forward. Behind him, the battle for Earth continued. The first DRAKORATH guard died without knowing what killed him. Markov's rifle coughed once. Suppressed. Precise. The round punched through the gap between the creature's helmet and neck scales. It dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Plasma rifle clattering against the metal deck. Ven signaled the team forward. They moved through the throne of scales in tactical formation. Ven on point. Kowalski behind him. Whisper ready. Smith in the middle, eyes on his tactical display. Markov covering their 6. Reyes carried the breaching charges, his demolition pack heavy against his back. 4 decks to go. The ship's interior was a nightmare of alien design. Corridors twisted at odd angles. The walls were lined with conduits that pulsed with a sickly amber light. The air was thick, humid, at least 40 degrees Celsius. Sweat soaked through their tactical gear within minutes. Ven pushed forward. He had trained for this. They all had. 6 months of studying intercepted schematics. 6 months of drilling in mock-ups built to DRAKORATH specifications. Now they would find out if it was enough. They descended a service ladder to the next deck. More corridors. More heat. The thrum of the shield generator grew louder, a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through the deck plates. Smith checked his display. 2 decks remaining. Shield generator is in the central engineering bay. Large compartment. Multiple access points. Guard presence? Ven asked. Unknown. But if I were them, I would have at least 30 soldiers protecting their most critical system. Assume 50, Ven said. Plan accordingly. They kept moving. The next DRAKORATH patrol appeared around a corner without warning. 4 soldiers, armored, armed. Their golden eyes widened as they registered the human intruders. Kowalski was faster. Whisper roared, a sound that was anything but quiet. The custom shotgun was loaded with tungsten flechette rounds, designed specifically to punch through DRAKORATH scales. The first soldier caught the blast in the chest and went down hard. Kowalski racked the slide and fired again. The second soldier's head disappeared in a spray of dark blood. The other 2 opened fire. Plasma bolts scorched the air. Ven dove left, returning fire with his rifle. Markov put a round through one soldier's eye. Reyes threw himself against the wall as a bolt missed him by centimeters, close enough to singe his sleeve. The last soldier charged. It was fast, terrifyingly fast for something so large. It crossed the distance in 2 strides, jaws open, claws extended. It slammed into Kowalski before he could bring Whisper up. They hit the deck together. The DRAKORATH's claws raked across Kowalski's chest armor, gouging deep furrows in the ceramic plate. Its jaws snapped at his throat. Kowalski jammed his forearm into the creature's mouth, feeling teeth scrape against his armored bracer. Ven pressed his pistol against the DRAKORATH's skull and fired twice. The creature went limp. Kowalski shoved the corpse aside, breathing hard. Blood seeped from where the claws had breached his armor, but the wounds were shallow. "You good?" Ven asked. "I will live." Kowalski retrieved Whisper from the deck. "But I am going to need a new vest after this. Add it to the requisition list." They kept going. 1 deck to go. On the bridge of the Throne of Scales, Korax received the report. Apex. He approached Vorak Drath's command throne, his frill tight against his skull. "We have a problem." Vorak Drath did not turn from the viewport. Outside, the battle raged. Human ships and DRAKORATH vessels tore each other apart in the void. The primitives were fighting harder than expected, dying harder. But they were still dying. "Speak," Vorak Drath rumbled. "Intruders, inside the ship. A patrol failed to report. Security sensors detected weapons fire on Deck 7. Now Vorak Drath turned. His golden eyes narrowed. "Intruders? Here? On my ship?" "Yes, Apex. A small team. They appear to be moving toward the engineering section." Vorak Drath rose from his throne. His full height, 3.1 meters of scarred, scaled fury, seemed to fill the bridge. His tail lashed against the deck, cracking the metal plating. "The shield generator. Yes, Apex. They're moving toward engineering." Vorak Drath's jaws parted, revealing rows of serrated teeth. A sound emerged from his throat, something between a growl and a laugh. "Bold! For primitives!" He stepped toward Korax. "Take a kill team. Find them. Bring me their heads. I want to see what species dares to board the Throne of Scales." Korax bowed his head. "It will be done, Apex." He turned and strode off the bridge, already summoning his best soldiers to him. 12 warriors, veterans of 100 boarding actions. They would find these intruders, and they would make them regret ever setting foot on this ship. Sigma Division reached the engineering deck. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, the heart of the Throne of Scales. At its center, the shield generator rose like a pillar of dark metal and pulsing energy. Conduits snaked from its base in every direction, feeding power to emitters throughout the ship. The air hummed with barely contained force. Between Sigma and the generator stood 40 DRAKORATH soldiers. They were arranged in defensive positions throughout the chamber, behind consoles, on elevated walkways, clustered around the generator itself. Their weapons were raised and ready. They had been expecting company. Ven assessed the situation in 2 seconds. "Markov, elevated position, left walkway. Suppress their flanks. Kowalski, Reyes, with me. We push center. Smith, find me a way to disable their backup power. I do not want those shields coming back online after we blow the generator." "On it!" Smith was already moving, slipping along the chamber's edge toward a control terminal. Markov climbed. His rifle was an extension of his body. He found a position behind a support strut, sighted down the scope, and began picking off targets. 1 shot, 1 kill, then another, and another. The DRAKORATH returned fire. Plasma bolts filled the air. Ven led the charge down the center, using overturned equipment as cover. Kowalski was beside him, Whisper thundering with each shot. Reyes followed, the demolition pack bouncing against his back as he ran. They fought through the first line of defenders, then the second. Bodies fell, DRAKORATH soldiers crumpling under concentrated fire, but more kept coming. The chamber was too large, too many angles, too many enemies. A plasma bolt caught Kowalski in the shoulder. He spun, hit the deck, but kept firing from his back. Blood soaked through his armor. "Kowalski!" Ven grabbed him, dragging him behind a console. I am fine. Keep going. Kowalski's face was pale, but his grip on Whisper never wavered. Get Reyes to that generator. I will cover you. Ven hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. Hold this position. Do not die. Not planning on it. Ven and Reyes pushed forward. Markov's rifle cracked overhead, dropping DRAKORATH soldiers before they could flank. Smith's voice came through the comm. Backup power system located. I can disable it, but I need 60 seconds. You have 30, Ven replied. They reached the base of the shield generator. Reyes was already pulling charges from his pack, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He slapped the first charge against the generator's primary conduit, then the second, then the third. 15 seconds to arm, he said. Then we run. Ven turned to cover him and found himself face to face with Corax. The DRAKORATH second in command had entered the chamber through a side passage, his kill team fanning out behind him. He was massive, nearly as large as Vorak Dreth himself. His scales bore the marks of countless battles. His golden eyes locked onto Ven with predatory focus. Human, Corax rumbled. You should not have come here. Ven raised his rifle. Neither should you. He fired. Corax moved faster than anything that size had a right to move. He dodged the burst, closed the distance in 2 strides, and swung his tail in a vicious arc. Ven dove under the strike, rolled, came up firing. Rounds sparked off Corax's chest armor. The DRAKORATH laughed, a deep, grinding sound. Your weapons cannot hurt me, primitive. He lunged forward, claws extended. Ven sidestepped, drove his combat knife into the gap between Corax's arm and torso. The blade sank deep. Dark blood welled around the wound. Corax roared. His fist caught Ven in the chest, sending him flying backward into a console. Something cracked. Ribs, probably. Pain exploded through his body. Reyes finished arming the charges. Done! We need to go! Corax turned toward him, jaws parting. Ven drew his pistol and shot Corax in the eye. The DRAKORATH screamed, a sound that shook the chamber. He staggered, clawing at his ruined eye socket, blood pouring down his face. Ven was already moving, grabbing Reyes by the arm, pulling him toward the exit. Smith! Backup power! Disabled! Go! Markov! Kowalski! Fall back! Markov dropped from his position, sprinting toward the exit. Kowalski rose from behind his console, firing Whisper with one hand, while clutching his wounded shoulder with the other. The team converged at the chamber's main entrance. Behind them, Corax recovered enough to bellow orders. Stop them! Kill them all! DRAKORATH soldiers surged forward. Reyes hit the detonator. The charges exploded. The shield generator tore itself apart in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. The explosion ripped through the engineering bay, consuming soldiers and equipment alike. The shockwave threw Sigma Division through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. For a moment, everything was heat and noise and chaos. Then silence. Ven pushed himself up. His ears were ringing. His ribs screamed in protest. But he was alive. Sound off. Status. Markov. Functional. Smith. Minor burns. Operational. Reyes, I think I lost an eyebrow. Otherwise good. Silence. Kowalski? Ven turned. Kowalski lay against the corridor wall, Whisper still clutched in his hands. His eyes were open. His chest was still. A piece of shrapnel had found the gap in his armor. It had pierced his throat. Ven stared at him for a moment. Then he reached down and closed Kowalski's eyes. Sigma led to Carthage. Shield generator destroyed. 1 KIA. Recommend immediate fire mission on enemy flagship. Carpenter's voice came through, steady and calm. Confirmed. Sigma led. Longbow is firing. Get to extraction. On the bridge of the UEDC Carthage, Carpenter watched the tactical display. The Throne of Scales' shield signature had vanished. The flagship was defenseless. Longbow Station, you are cleared to fire. On the surface of Luna, 6 kinetic launch platforms activated. Magnetic rails charged. Targeting computers locked onto the coordinates transmitted by the Carthage. They fired. Tungsten rods, each one the size of a telephone pole, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance between Luna and the Throne of Scales in seconds. The first rod hit the flagship amidships. It punched through the hull like a needle through paper, exiting on the other side in a spray of molten metal. The second rod hit 3 decks above, shredding the command section. The third struck the engine block. The Throne of Scales began to break apart. On the bridge, DRAKORATH felt his ship dying around him. Explosions rocked the deck. Conduits burst. Crew members were thrown from their stations as gravity fluctuated wildly. He stood at the viewport, watching his fleet fall into disarray. Without his coordination, without his commands, the DRAKORATH armada was fragmenting. Ships collided with each other. Formation broke. The Primitives' railguns tore into them with renewed fury. This could not be happening. He was the apex. He had never lost. He had never retreated. He had conquered 100 species, burned 1,000 worlds. He could not fall to these insects. Another impact shook the ship. The viewport cracked. Atmosphere began to vent. DRAKORATH turned from the dying stars. His golden eyes found Korax staggering onto the bridge, one eye a ruined socket, blood coating half his face. "Apex," Korax gasped. "The ship is lost. We must evacuate." DRAKORATH said nothing. He looked at the viewport one last time, at the human fleet advancing, at his armada breaking, at the world he had come to conquer, now staring back at him in defiance. "The Imperium does not retreat," he said quietly. The final longbow rod hit the bridge. DRAKORATH ceased to exist. The battle ended not with a roar, but with silence. The DRAKORATH fleet, what remained of it, scattered. Some ships attempted to flee toward the outer system. Human destroyers ran them down. Others tried to surrender, broadcasting on all frequencies. The Carthage did not respond. Railguns spoke instead. By the time the last DRAKORATH vessel was reduced to debris, the Sol system was quiet again. Wreckage drifted through the void, the remains of ships from both sides. The Aegis ring, reduced to 7 platforms, fell silent. The guns cooled. On the UEDC Carthage, General Floyd Carpenter stood at the viewport of his bridge. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The weight of command had carved new lines into his face. Behind him, his crew worked in exhausted silence, cataloging damage, coordinating rescue operations, counting the dead. There were many to count. 14 human ships destroyed, 6 more crippled beyond repair, over 3,000 personnel killed in action. The Relentless had been lost with all hands when its reactor breached during the boarding action. The Indomitable had survived, but barely. Its corridors were still being cleared of DRAKORATH corpses. A victory, but a costly one. Commander Torres approached. "Sir, Sigma Division has been recovered. 4 survivors. 1 KIA. Kowalski. And Colonel Venn is requesting permission to debrief. Later. Let him rest." Carpenter paused. "Let them all rest." Torres nodded and withdrew. Carpenter remained at the viewport. The stars stared back at him, cold and indifferent. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the system, the DRAKORATH Imperium still existed. This fleet had been a vanguard, a conquering force sent to claim a primitive world. There would be more. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, Earth had survived. A communications officer approached. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the outer colonies. They're asking what happened. What do we tell them?" Carpenter was silent for a moment. What could he tell them? That the galaxy had collapsed while they slept? That an empire of predators had come for them? That thousands had died to buy Earth a single day? "Tell them the truth," he said at last. "Tell them we were attacked. Tell them we won. And tell them to prepare, because this isn't over." The officer nodded and moved away. Carpenter turned back to the viewport. His reflection stared back at him, an old man in uniform, carrying a weight that would only grow heavier with time. Torres stepped beside him and held out a datapad. Colonel Venn submitted this before he went to medical. He said you'd want to see it. Carpenter took the datapad. The image filled the screen, footage from Venn's helmet cam, captured during the firefight in the engineering bay. A DRAKORATH soldier lay slumped against a console. Clutched in its clawed hand, half melted by plasma fire, was a small device, a human device. Carpenter recognized it instantly. The emergency beacon. The one he had given to Turen years ago. One of the DRAKORATH had taken it from Turen's body. A trophy. Salvage. Something meaningless to them. They had carried it aboard the Throne of Scales without knowing what it was, or what it meant. Now it was nothing but melted slag on a dead ship. Carpenter studied the image for a moment. Then he handed the datapad back. "Archive it," he said. "Flag it as recovered enemy material." Torres nodded and stepped away. Carpenter remained at the viewport. Beyond the glass, the wreckage of the DRAKORATH fleet drifted in silence among the stars. Broken hulls, cooling metal, the remains of a force that had come to claim Earth and failed. The DRAKORATH had expected submission. They had found resistance. And somewhere in the debris of the Throne of Scales, tumbling among the dead and the ruined steel, a melted piece of human technology spun slowly through the void. It would never transmit again. It didn't need to. Its message had already been received.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.